You're listening to Aging Today, the podcast where together we explore the options to aging on your terms.
When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, will you still be sending me a Valentine? Birthday greetings, bottle of wine. If I've been out till 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
And now the podcast where together we discuss proactive aging on your terms, connecting to the professional advice of our special guests while creating better days throughout the aging process. Now here's your host, Mark Turnbull.
And welcome to Aging Today. We are the podcast where together we explore the many options to aging on your terms. You can find Aging Today and our 4 years of past programs on our website. All you got to do is go to your website, type in www.agingtoday.us. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast channels, such as Spotify, Pandora, or any of those podcasts that you utilize, Apple, iHeart, Spreaker, and there's many, many others. You can find our podcast on there and dive into the past 4 years of some of the great conversations we've had with our guests. And then finally, I'd like to hear from you, our listeners. We want you to know that the questions you are asking on the aging process. And we also want to know what aging experts you would like to hear from at Aging Today. So contact me, your host, Mark Turnbull, at mark@agingtoday.us. That is mark@agingtoday.us. And I would love to hear from you for suggestions on future topics. And then if you have any questions for our past guests, if you didn't quite catch their email, we'll be glad to pass that information on to them as well. Well, we have an old friend coming back to the studio today, and she's a delight in my life, and she's made a big difference. I know not only in my life, but in many of you, our listeners. And Georgena Eggleston, welcome back to Aging Today.
Mark, it's a delight to be here. Thank you for inviting me again.
I'm so excited to have you back on the show. And, you are the trauma specialist. You are our grief guide. And I know many of our listening audience have enjoyed your book. So tell us the name of the book again for those that maybe are just tuning in for the first time.
It's called A New Morning, Discovering the Gifts in Grief.
Okay, now rumor has it that you're writing a second book. Is
That's
that true?
correct.
All right.
The rumor mill is going, Mark.
Okay. Now, will this be a continuation of the first book, or is it going to go in a completely different direction?
It will have some foundational principles from the first book, but we've discovered so many things in the last 6 years about grief. Mm-hmm. My clients continually teach me. And so as everything is changing in our world, so is grief.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've learned in the past 6 years that have changed, and maybe how you're expressing those ideas. And so what are some of those changes?
Well, as I've said before, grief is a consequence of significant loss. And we all know that loss is a part of life. What's changing now is the awareness that there is a new way to be in grief. Yes, once you have a significant loss, that loss will always be with you as grief, but it changes. It becomes different. And that difference can be experienced in as little as 90 days or as up to 2 years in a healthy grief cycle. And then what I know is many of us get stuck in grief, and so it feels like we're there much longer. I was myself because I didn't have these tools and a grief guide like myself.
Mm-hmm. And your book it addressed many of those issues.
It did.
Yeah.
And we started with self-care as a gift in grief. And now what I've discovered is self-compassion. Because so many times, Mark, what happens to us is that our mind is very, very mean and critical. We don't think we're doing grief right. And so when people can begin to be self-compassionate and gentle with themselves and just give themselves space, that's what I'm saying now is the first level. So after we have some self-compassion, then we can begin to appreciate ourselves and all that we're learning and doing to move beyond our grief.
Yeah. One of the barriers, what are the barriers to us as Americans where we just are in denial?
Oh, well,
Of the grief that is in our bodies, and we all experience it. And if you're not acknowledging that, then you haven't been alive for the past year and a half.
that's
right?
exactly right. But we as Americans think grief is a dirty word. It is a 5-letter word, but grief is something that we're illiterate, we're grief-phobic, we think we'll never die, we think we're bulletproof. Well, the last year and a half has taught us that is not the case.
Yeah.
And so for us to begin to realize that we're not broken by grief, we're broken open to grow. And that sounds to some people very, very harsh, because how can I grow after my life has been turned upside down? It's been shattered. My child has died. Now what? And there's always a way through. And that's our challenge as people. And so one of the things that I've discovered and we'll talk about in the book is the foreground and background. When someone has a significant loss, grief covers the tapestry of our lives. We're thinking about the pet that died, or the person that died, or the job that we lost, or our home that was burned. Those things constantly take up our mental attention and focus. And then as grief moves to the background, that's the shift that I want people to begin to be aware of and be compassionate with themselves and say, oh, I didn't think about that person today. That's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Who has a harder time with grief? Men or women? Or is it a combination?
It depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that there are many sensitive men that are finding their way to my office now. Mm-hmm. And what they're aware of is it's okay to be emotional. And I think the person that has the most difficult time, Mark, with grief is the person that is resistive. They either think the loss didn't happen, it couldn't have happened to me, so they push everything away that has to do with that, and think that having emotions is a weakness.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably why men have a harder time.
They do. They have a tendency.
But you're seeing the change.
I am seeing the change. I have many young men now that are in my office in their 30s and 40s who are going through grief. They were able to recognize it, and it wasn't always because somebody had died. It was a divorce, a child had a mental health issue. It plunged the whole family into grief because the loss was, oh my gosh, this child is going to need support. We didn't plan on this.
Yeah. And I think one of the travesties of our era in this day is divorce, and oftentimes we don't think of it as a loss or in a grief sense. We think of always death, but anytime you have that loss, and divorce is pretty prevalent in our country. I've gone through a divorce. I believe you've gone through
I
a
have
divorce.
too, yes.
And so, it's important that we take care of that. And I was thinking of my children when you brought that up, is that I don't even know if they've gone through the proper steps of grieving the loss of of their mom and dad's marriage.
Yes. Well, it was very interesting to me, Mark, because prior to my divorce, we'd had many losses. There were 5 people in our family that died in less than 4 years. We'd closed our business because of a shift in healthcare. It wasn't anything we did wrong. I didn't realize that at the time. So by the time we chose to get a divorce, we felt like we were 2 trees that had grown in different directions. I experienced anxiety as my primary emotion is grief. And I didn't even recognize that it was grief.
Yeah. That's pretty common.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yeah. And I think there's times and moments where I feel sorrow for the loss of that marriage and the loss of the family being together under one roof. There's so many different ways that we express it.
Yes, or not. And when we do not, that's when we end up feeling numb and walking through life shut down.
Yeah. Well, enough of my therapy. Let's move on. And I want to talk a little bit about the institute that you started and tell our listening audience what you're doing, because I'm very fascinated, and it's a tremendous resource that's at the tips of all of our fingertips. So tell us about it.
All right. Well, it's Integrated Wellbeing Institute. And the intention is to allow people to access what's happening in the therapy room in the business world, and to allow therapists, nurses, and coaches to bring the tools that are so effective to their own clients. So the Institute has 3 parts. It has the private practice for grieving people of all ages, if 21 on up. And the oldest person I've ever worked with, Mark, has been 96.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Wow. Her spouse died, and we did therapy together, long distance on FaceTime.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was amazing. So there's that. And then I put together a 4-week program for HR professionals, because they have so many employees that come to them in crisis. And this gives the HR professionals tools for their own use as people that then they can share with others. And there's a resource reset library that is a series of videos, so people can share those with their employees, and it's been very, very helpful. We've seen some real grounding and centering, people feeling less anxious because of the training and the tools, and that makes my heart happy.
Yeah.
And then the third part of the Institute is what happened during 2020, when the 20 years of therapy that I've done with people was put into a 12-week training program for therapists, nurses, and coaches, so that they can begin to go beyond talk therapy and allow the people they're working with to access the messages, the images, and the guidance of the body.
Okay, so now where's the website? How do we get there?
Oh, you go to integratedwellbeinginstitute.com.
Oh, easy.
Easy.
Okay, and then anybody that is interested in learning more about it, they can just scroll through. I went through your website, and it is so well done. I don't know whoever did it, but they nailed it.
Thank you.
It's easy to navigate, and it directs you to one of those 3 options.
It does. And one of the things we're doing this month in October, so please go now and then go back again in November so you can see the before and after. But there will be many, many free tools that we have for beyond what's there right now. So for instance, in the private practice, there's going to be a resource there of videos, an audio that I did, and certain blogs that I've curated that take people through the various aspects of grief, because I've been writing weekly blogs since 2017. So that's too much to expect people to go to. For the coaches and the nurses and the therapists, we're putting together an emotional well-being quiz. And it's called the Energy Budget Quiz. So just that name is very intriguing.
Now, what's the quiz going to do for me? If I go on and take that quiz, is it going to tell me
what your energy budget is?
Okay.
Because we all have one and we're not even aware of it sometimes. And how are we depleting it, or how are we going to increase the energy?
Yeah, and
that we have.
Will it identify the blockages that is hampering some of my energy?
Yes, because what people will get is they'll get an immediate report of their score and then various information about that. And I worked on that this morning before I left to see clients.
Okay. Well, then will a counselor or a therapist or somebody make connection after you've taken the quiz, or will you be given the opportunity to make connection the other way?
Yes.
So that you can talk about that with someone?
Absolutely.
Because obviously you're going to need to know, what do I do with this?
Exactly. And then the third aspect that people will find on the Integrated Wellbeing Institute is what's there for the HR professionals, and there will be some free resources for HR professionals to access too.
Okay. Well, it sounds great, and I'm very excited to see how the Institute begins to serve people. And again, you don't have to be in Portland, Oregon.
No.
Anywhere in the world.
Yes.
All you have to do is go to the website, and on the website you walk through the different, choices. And so today's topic, we're going to be talking about, the workplace ER, and focusing a little bit on that. And it is an emergency room. Why is the workplace an emergency room?
Right now, people are so stressed. There's so much anger and anxiety that people are unable to do their job. I'm very fortunate because basically this program, Mark, was field tested because a corporation hired me to work on a monthly basis with their employees. And people make a private appointment with me. And I found myself using the same tools over and over as people were stressed about what was happening at home as well as in the workplace. And when you can be aware of how to respond instead of react, how to use your body as a guide instead of your mind that gets so burned out and burned up, that's a new way of being then in the workplace. So right now, there is a real crisis in the workplace. HR people are struggling to get people to come to work. There have been such a decline and a turnover. And people during the pandemic said, I can work from home. I don't need to do X, Y, Z. I'll go off and do ABC. So HR people are really struggling to recruit, and they're struggling to keep the people that are in the company healthy. So that's why we designed this.
Yeah. What were some of your takeaways after spending this time in this one particular company? What were some of your takeaways? What was the source of the anxiety?
People not understanding their own power. People not being able to go inside and listen to their body, to the aches and pains and the messages. People not having the tools and the awareness that the body tells the truth and its language is metaphor. So I've taught people in the workplace who are saying, I've got such a headache. Well, who or what in your life is that headache? And it very often is the same repetitive person or situation. So we're able to work through that. Who or what is the pain in your neck? I've taught people in the workplace, Mark, to stretch, yawn, and sigh throughout the day. And the benefits of that are many, but right away you're going to relax your upper body, your mind, your brain itself is going to be flooded with more oxygen. And those two things right away benefit a person.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking of where we are in our society today with the pandemic and the stress and the anxiety that the healthcare professionals are feeling, in particular nurses. They're overworked.
Yes.
They're so overworked that they're leaving the hospital system, and then the mandate, to get the vaccine is driving some of them away as well. But it's just primarily the overtime, the stress, the anxiety that they're all feeling, and they just need a break.
And Mark, I used to work at Shock Trauma in Baltimore, Maryland. And at that time, I worked with those critical care nurses and those docs as people would come in with head injuries and multiple injuries. And that was where I began to learn to breathe as I walked from room to room. And by being in that present moment, I was able to first exhale, which is a tool for our listeners to listen to, then breathe in through my nose and breathe out through my nose to reset my nervous system. So that when I went into the next room, I'd left the trauma behind me and showed up present and fresh for the next patient. But that is, again, something that you have to have awareness and a little bit of training. Doesn't take a master's degree, just a little bit of training.
Yeah. In your training with and working with people, I can imagine that a lot of the anxiety that people are feeling today is because they don't have the internal, I don't know if it's the internal fortitude or if they don't have, that ability to stand up for themselves and say, enough. I can't take any more hours. The stress, I'm thinking in particular nurses, that they haven't had that ability to say, I cannot work 60 hours. I cannot work 80 hours. And they're burned out. They're leaving. And what would you suggest to those medical professionals out there to don't go that far down the road?
That's it. So when you begin to wake up in the morning and you're not rested, then it's time to seek guidance, because the tools are out there. And I've thought about them many, many times, the healthcare professionals, because I'm no longer active, but I remember what it was like. And so it's that reset is possible when you have the mindset to do it, the connection with your body. But so often those of us in healthcare, you know yourself, Mark, in your business, we're really good at taking care of others, but we don't have the awareness for ourselves.
Yeah.
So we just keep pushing. I said to a healthcare professional that was in my office this morning at 8 o'clock, I said, who was just talking about this very thing, I said, oh yes, I remember when I was your age, I rode my body like a horse. I didn't have any awareness of that ache or that pain. I just kept pushing. And that's what they're being called to do in the healthcare settings today.
Yeah. And I think some of it too is we put a false expectation on ourselves as professionals to be that I call it the junior messiah complex, where we're going to go save the world, right? I'm the only one left, and I can do this. I can add a few more hours here and a few more hours there. 3 years down the road, you're a wreck.
That's right.
You're spent.
Yes. The gas tank is empty. The energy budget is spent.
Yeah.
Overspent.
Yeah.
That's right. And so that's why awareness is the first key to change. Change happens only in the present moment. And when people begin to increase their awareness internally first, how am I feeling in my body in this moment? It would be interesting for your audience to just stop for a moment and notice, are they sitting in a chair? Can you feel your hips? Do you have your legs crossed under you? What position are you in? Can you just in this moment feel your body? And then exhale loudly on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, which allows the air to come in. And this time notice how far in your body does the air go? Does it stop at your throat, your upper chest, the middle of your chest? Does it go all the way down into your body? Those are the kinds of things that develop awareness.
I think that this is a call to all the hospital administrators, the HR people, to get on the website right now, get a hold of Georgena and her team, and rejuvenate, build your people back up. Don't wear them down anymore. We can't afford that as a society.
And having been there myself in my 40s, running up and down 12 flights of stairs at University Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, I understand.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
What's the difference between emotions and feelings?
Well, emotions live in our body, and they're essentially explosions of misunderstandings that you clearly perceive in the body. So, for instance, when that anger comes up, it's a call for care. It's a call to stop and really listen. You know, it might show up as a tightness, a jolt, oh my goodness. And these emotions have information for us in the form of messages, and then, like I said earlier, metaphors. Feelings, and the two words are used interchangeably all the time.
They're very confusing to
Exactly. And so people will say, oh, I'm feeling angry. Yeah, that's an emotion. It's okay. Just be sure you're in touch with your anger.
An emotion would be, I am angry. And then a feeling would be
what we're sensing outside our body, the stress that's resulting in me exploding.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay. So one is more external, the other is internal.
Absolutely.
Okay. Emotions are internal.
They are. They live in the body.
You're listening to Aging Today with your host Mark Turnbull and his guest Georgena Eggleston as they discuss workplace ER, managing workplace anxiety. We'll hear more from Mark and Georgena in just a moment.
Sometimes I'd like to smack old age right in the kisser.
Oh yeah, still got those moves.
I will be fabulous.
Comfort Care can help with as much or as little home care as you need. From medication reminders and meal prep to everyday chores and errands. Let us create your personalized care plan and find the perfect caregiver match so you can live your best life possible.
Call Comfort Care at 503-636-0417.
A Did You Know moment from Comfort Care Home Care of West Lynn.
Did you know that all of us at Aging in Portland care about all of you caregivers out there? Here are 5 resolutions we offer to caregivers everywhere. Take the time to care for yourself. Number 1, schedule a wellness exam with your physician. You cannot care for others if you do not take good care of yourself. Call your physician's office today to schedule an exam. Number 2, eat nutritious foods. When you are busy, it is easy to grab quick, but not necessarily healthy foods. Replace fast food meals and processed snacks with fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Number 3, sneak in exercise throughout the day. If an hour at the gym or a long walk is too time-consuming, focus on fitting in small amounts of exercise throughout the day. Park your car farther from work and take the stairs instead of the elevator. Turn on your favorite upbeat music and dance to 3 songs. You will raise your heart rate for about 10 minutes. Number 4, adopt healthy ways to deal with stress. Constantly caring for the needs of others and not yourself can lead to stress. Try yoga or meditation. You may find it calming. Make plans to see good friends as often as possible. Schedule a little me time into every day to pursue a favorite hobby, read, or watch a favorite TV show. Number 5, enjoy giving yourself a pat on the back. You sacrifice a great deal to care for others and may not receive much, if any, appreciation for all that you do. Each day, remind yourself that those you serve have a better life because of you. If you are a family caregiver that needs a break from the daily care of your loved one, Comfort Care of West Lynn can help. We all need a little break now and then. Allow us to give you some respite. Comfort Care cares. Give Comfort Care of West Lynn a call at 503-636-0417.
This message was another Did You Know moment for living your best life possible.
Now, more of our discussion about workplace ER, managing workplace anxiety, with Mark Turnbull and his guest Georgena Eggleston on Aging Today.
We have the ability to control our feelings. Is that true? Because I have the power
Yes.
to block
You do.
exterior things coming at me.
Yes. And you also have the power to block your emotions.
Okay. explain
Because
that.
Debbie Ford gave us a beautiful image about shadow work. And she said, holding down those deep, dark parts of yourself you do not want to acknowledge are like holding 2 beach balls down underwater. So when I gave that image to my client today, who is a therapist, a psychotherapist, she laughed out loud. And I said, yes, we are in the business, those of us that are in counseling, of holding the space for people. And so we do not feel our emotions, and so we hold them down like beach balls. So what that means is you have the power to just say, oh, I'm not angry, and just go on. Or you have the power to say, oh, I'm not anxious, and just go on. But that feeling, that emotion, and see, I used it interchangeably there, is in your body. And so you just push it down and pack it down, and finally it gets to such an intensity, it just explodes.
And the explosion, is that an expression or is that of the real emotion? Okay.
Yeah. And so what I'm teaching people to do in the workplace is to become aware of their habitual reactions, because we all have them, just like that. We'll explode, we'll be anxious, whatever it is, bite somebody's head off. How can I pause? How can I breathe? How can I make a different choice? And that's what you were talking about, were the choices.
Yeah. Now you're a coach, one of your many labels or hats that you wear, but you're a coach in somatic grief release. What is somatic grief release?
When people have an ache or a pain in their body, it's a call for care. And so what I do is I take people in to notice in their body where they're feeling an ache, a pain, a tightness, or even a numbness. And so what we've done is we've recognized that place in the body. The next thing we do is we begin to relate to it, because people don't like to have pain in their body.
Yeah.
So we begin to say, how big is it? What does it feel like? Sometimes it's a jagged rock. Sometimes it's a ball. And then what color is it? Does it have a temperature? Does it have a texture? And by unpacking these things, then we can begin to relate to it. So we do that with curiosity, Mark, instead of dread, instead of fear. And finally, by sticking with it long enough in this guided process, there is an image that's revealed very often, or a message that's revealed. And the message can just say, oh, you're going to be okay. And how wonderful is that when you're in a stressful situation to have your internal self, your well-being within, saying to you, you're going to be okay. And then very often, completely, we'll see either a total release or partial release of the ache or the pain. So it's recognize where the ache or tightness or the pain is in your body, relate to it.
So when you, in order to recognize it, you have to slow down.
Absolutely.
In your day.
You do.
To be able to understand, because I'm guilty of this. I go through my day 150,000 miles an hour. And it's interesting how over a period of time, if I do that day after day after day after day, I do develop pains in my body, especially my back.
Yes.
And is that what you're talking about?
I am.
And then that causes even more stress upon stress.
It does, because the metaphors for the back are, oh, I'm back in this place again. Many people can feel overwhelmed. Who or what is the pain in your back? We've heard the metaphor, get off my back. No? But it goes back to that riding your body like a horse.
Yeah. And the best way so you say recognize it, and then relate to it, and then release it.
Yes.
Is the release, when I hear you say release, in my life, the best form of release for me is exercise.
Yeah, beautiful.
Is that the...
That can be a release.
But sometimes I get going too fast that I forget to exercise.
Exactly. Another thing I'll have people do is rub their hands together and place their hands then on that place in their body and just begin to notice, what is it like to contact yourself? All of this work is based on my training as a Rubenfeld synergist. And Alana Rubenfeld, the genius that developed this pioneering mind-body process, still lives in Medford, Oregon. She's no longer doing this work. But what she taught was the body tells the truth, but we don't know how to listen to it. So that's what her method did.
Yeah.
But it's just like you said, we've got to slow down and listen and be curious instead of afraid.
Yeah. And that's called the somatic grief release. And 3 parts: to recognize, relate, and realize.
Release.
A release.
And the release is not something you do intentionally. The release happens as you're relating to it.
Oh, okay.
So the next time you have a pain in your back, for instance, for you to rub your hands together, to just simply put them on your back, notice, what does it feel like to have support from myself supporting me in my back?
And that can relate to pain in our bodies. It can relate to, and the pain can be manifested in many different ways.
Right. We've got physical pain that often has an emotional component to it. And that's why right now, at this particular time and place that we're in, emotions are so volatile. We can't miss them. So, and it's because we haven't allowed ourselves to feel them. You know, we were raised to pull up your bootstraps. It's where our culture came from.
Yeah. And at that particular time of, in our nation, it was required.
Absolutely, it was required.
The foundation, that was the foundation being built, and I think that's where some of the pushback of that generation today, we need to be, in my opinion, I think we need a little more gratitude for the foundation that my mom and dad's generation had built.
Absolutely.
By pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. That
right.
was what was required back then. It may not be, the most pressing need right now to pull yourself
or
up. Or
the healthiest thing to do.
Yeah. But it worked then. It was fine. And now we need to move on. And I think we're going through a paradigm shift in this culture. And that paradigm shift, I think for many of us, is uncomfortable because we don't know what we know what we're letting go, but we don't know what we're actually inviting to replace that.
That's right.
And that is a sense of, for me, I grieve that. Because I'm letting go of the familiar.
Yes.
I'm being forced in our society, and no one likes to be forced.
No.
and mandated. And yet that's what's happening. And I think that's what is happening to our culture today. And that's part of, I call it, there's a spiritual vacuum in our culture. And we're trying to fill that spiritual vacuum with something that I don't think is spiritual.
And that's what this process is, because all of us have that internal compass. All of us have that divine light within. It gets covered up. And by getting out of the mind, which lies and can be mean, and into the body, which tells the truth, we can begin to listen deeper and find, again, that still small voice within ourselves.
Yeah. Change is hard.
It is hard. And right now we're in a time of uncertainty. It's like we're letting go of one trapeze bar and we haven't caught the other one yet. And so what's required of us is trust. What's required of us is to discover that well-being, that power within.
Yeah.
Instead of giving it away, to go within.
Yeah.
And that's what this company, that's what this institute does. It teaches people how to go within and trust what they're experiencing so that then people can feel centered and rooted and walk forward in business or in healthcare or through grief with a sense of confidence.
Yeah. I think that one of the key things for me is that we're missing in today's culture that my parents' culture had a firm grasp of, and that is autonomy. We all want to be autonomous, and we have to, and that's what made America so great, was our autonomy, individual autonomy. And we're being asked to let go of that individual autonomy to begin to give it to something else. And again, that's a change that is extremely scary. Because we're being funneled down a road where, this is, I don't want to get political on this show, but there's a socialism there of letting go of the individual autonomy and giving it to the group. And that's a change. And that, for me, I'm grieving that autonomy and bigger government and bigger groups and more powerful voices, and it just doesn't feel good.
And it brings us to the essence of grief, which is to answer the question, after this big loss, who am I now?
Yeah.
So that's why at the Institute, we teach people to go inside and discover the answers to that question. So even though they can seem like they're lost, they're really in that place of groundedness, and their energy ripples out to other people as the power and the confidence and the kindness and the love that they are.
Yeah. With change, you developed an acronym. Tell us a little bit about that acronym to help us walk through change, because change is not easy.
No, it isn't. So one of the things that we have done for this is ACE. So this is how you ace your life. And the acronym is ACCEE. So we're spelling ACE just a little bit different, Mark.
Yeah.
It's a little expanded.
I thought it was more like sneezing, like achee.
Well, we've got awareness is the first key to change, is our A. And then with curiosity, we begin to connect and notice then what's happening in the body. So A is awareness. The first C is curiosity. Be curious, because that lights up a different part of your brain than where the fear is in your brain. And then connect. Go in and notice what's happening in your body. Do you have an ache, a pain, a tightness? Begin to explore. Notice the details of what's happening in your body. And then expand, feel lighter, taller, younger. So in essence, those listening very closely are going to hear it's similar to the recognize, that's what awareness is, and relate, with curiosity, connection, and explore, and finally expand is that release. So
can you give us an example?
Sure.
Let's for our listening audience and for me too, because my pea brain doesn't necessarily wrap around all of those. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's
a lot to unpack. So let's say that someone is sitting at their desk and they feel like they're ready to explode if they have to answer one more email. So they become aware, I am on the verge of exploding. And at that point, then they become curious, okay, where is that explosive feeling in my body? And begin to, okay, it's in my chest. So put a hand there, put your fingers there, and begin to connect with it. Oh, it feels like I'm exploding like dynamite. Somebody else may have a different kind of explosion. And then just to be with, well, what is it that's triggered me? What's put me in this place? With that curiosity, with that asking of questions, you're exploring. And then finally, it's, I really have not gone out and taken a walk. Not yesterday, not today, and I need to go outside my house, because I'm working at home, walk around my yard, look at the trees, look at the sky, come back in. It can be that simple, Mark.
Yeah.
It can be that simple for our seniors, too. Because they're in their home, and maybe they can't get outside, but they can look at a different picture on the wall, or maybe they can ask one of your caregivers to take them to a different place, to a different chair, to sit in the sunshine in their home or apartment.
There's a difference between the way people react to change. And I was thinking of your email analogy. And I get stressed out with the overwhelming amount of emails that I get. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I noticed when I just try to avoid them, to not look at them, it brings more anxiety.
It does. It's like holding those beach balls down under the water because you know they're there and you got to deal with them sooner or later.
Yeah. And so what I've found is that if I go through those emails and eliminate the ones that I don't need to answer to at all, and then that list that's sitting in front of me is a little bit more manageable. But that's one of the things that I do.
And I'm imagining too that you have an awareness of what emails that are left then are more urgent and important for you to answer. And then there can be those emails that pop in from a person you haven't heard from for so long, and I'm curious, what do they want?
Yeah, I remember back in my college days, there was a little booklet. It was a Christian booklet that talked about your limp and your imp and your vimp list.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And the limp was, how to manage all your stress and how to manage your day and how to manage, life in general. Mm-hmm. And to categorize things into the limp, imp, and vimp. So the limp was the least important.
Okay.
The imp was the important, and then the vimp was the very important. And so, I've kind of taken that on throughout it's funny how I just now, where did I get that? And that's really how I kind of organized my life, how that shaped me back in my college days. And that was kind of a self-realization right now where I got that skill. And that's where it came from. As simple as that.
Exactly. And we have those things that are workable, but we can lose sight of them when we're in that stressed all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's key. And then how we respond to the anxiety or the stress that's in our bodies. People do it differently. I mean, that's how I tackle it,
Yes.
or I'll go and exercise. But there's negative forms of responding to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. People lash out.
They lash out, or they drink, or they'll, avoid by doing all kinds of other vices, whatever they may be. But it's just, what is that? What's going on there? Is that just denial, or not having the proper tools, the inner disciplines to manage life?
So your question is, what happens when people choose unhealthy responses, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, what's going on in somebody's... I mean, we all do it to some extent.
Absolutely.
We've all had histories of...
Being on the couch.
Yeah.
Watching movies.
It's a TV.
Absolutely.
What a great way for it to be.
To veg out.
Yeah.
And zone out.
Yeah, and then you got all this stuff, and then when you get done with that show, it's guess what? It's still there.
The stuff is still there.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you ask about is motivation. How to be disciplined and motivated. And I think that goes back to self-compassion. Sometimes there are those of us who are overachievers and we expect way too much of ourselves. And then there are those of us who want to take on the world and change everything. And you alluded to that earlier because that's who we are, many of us in healthcare. One of the things that I'm aware of is when I'm in that state of I don't want to do something, it feels like I'm in a state of confusion. I'm lost. And at that point, what I simply do is sit down and I give myself a break. And I just am saying with curiosity, what's happening here? What do I need? In this moment, I need to soothe myself. And that's a word that we've brought into our workplace ER program. What soothes you? You know, what soothes my body, my heart, my mind? For some people, it is behaviors that aren't so good. Going shopping, all these kinds of things. So I've had my clients make a jar that have 10 different healthy ways to soothe. And it could be deep breathing. It could be moving to music in the house. And those of our seniors that are in wheelchairs can do that too, the upper body dancing, And then another thing that is important to do is to just say, okay, does this really have to be done right now? So it's one of those things that motivation comes and goes. And we have to look at the whole person. Have you eaten right? Have you gotten enough sleep? Have you had your water?
Yeah. One of the things I was just thinking about our seniors. And a loss of control is huge.
It is.
In their lives. And they are in grief. They're grieving that loss of their control, their destiny. How would you sit down with a senior or the family of a senior and walk them through that process of helping them to regain back control or to regain that sense of autonomy, that sense of just letting go of the loss?
It's important to sit down and say to the senior, what would you like to have happen? And in that answer, I'd like to be able to walk again. And they're not going to walk. So what was it that benefited you when you were walking? Maybe it was a change of scenery. So what you would like to have happen is a change of scenery. So it's important then to say, how can we make that happen? Where would you like to go? What would you like to do? Because there are so many quote unquote losses, but we still have within us our imagination. And when people can return to their imagination throughout the day, one of the things I say to my clients when they come in, Mark, is I will say to them, because it's a soothing tool, if you were in your favorite place in nature right now, where would that be? And they stop and they tell me, and I'll say, tell me more. Because maybe they're sitting on the bank of a river. Mm-hmm. Oh, are you on the ground? Are you on a rock? And have them go into more and more details of that so they can feel in their body the image of what's happening. And it automatically brings them to a state of soothing. So the imagination is powerful. Now, for those people who are experiencing dementia, they're not able to access that. And I don't know if that was part of your question or not.
Well, and I was thinking even of the place where they are living. Mm-hmm. You know, when the family decides that mom, dad no longer can live in their own home, mm-hmm. then they have to be placed into, a long-term care community of some kind, whatever mm-hmm. that means. Mm-hmm. And that's a grief.
It's huge loss.
It's a tremendous loss. I mean, you think of 50, 60 years in one home that mm-hmm. raised their children, and now they're having to remove themselves from that environment, and mm-hmm. it literally kills them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for many people, they do die before they move.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that.
Yeah, me too. Or within 6 weeks mm-hmm. after they make the move.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And how do we take your principles and apply them to release the grief, to heal from that loss? Because it is a loss. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a topic for another show.
It really is. And I'll leave today, as we come to a close, with the awareness that let's be curious. Mm-hmm. We've got to move you. You've got to move. So how can you find little miracles? Edison said, no, Einstein said, either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. So let's be curious about this new living environment and what are the miraculous things that can happen there. We've got to grieve the loss. We've got to be sad. We've got to be stubborn and maybe even throw a temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. And then say, and it's time to move. And so how can you be curious and see, again, how we started, Mark, the gifts in the moving, the gifts in the loss, the gifts in grief.
Excellent. I think that's a great place for us to stop. And I think that it'd be a great place for us to pick up on another show and take some of the things, the living situations, the losses that our seniors are going through, and apply them to some of your principles that you teach and that you coach others up in. I think would be wonderful. I would love to have you back. Can we do that?
We certainly can do that, Mark.
Fantastic. Yes. So just in a nutshell, we've gone a lot of places. We went down so many roads. If just to tie it up, loose ends, a nice little bow, how would you do that?
Remember, awareness is the first key to change. Change happens only in the present moment. The body tells the truth, and its language is metaphor. So allow yourself to feel your emotions. Allow yourself to be aware. Oh my gosh, I'm getting cranky. Express that so that you can have healthy emotions and a healthy life.
Well said. We've been talking with Georgena Eggleston. She's our trauma specialist, our grief guide. She is the founder of the Integrated Wellbeing Institute. And Georgena, what's the website one more time?
www.integratedwellbeinginstitute.com.
And it doesn't matter whether you're an individual or you're a company, and we're all experiencing grief at different levels of it, whether it's corporate in nature or if it's individual in its nature. That's what the Integrated Wellbeing Institute is designed to do, is to bring you the tools that you need for helping you to overcome whatever losses that you're experiencing in your life. Did I nail it?
You did.
Oh,
thank you, Mark, so much.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, Georgena, for being on today's show. And I also want to thank our show sponsor, Comfort Care Home Care of West Linn. The Comfort Care team at West Linn, Oregon is devoted to assisting you to live your best life possible. This is Mark Turnbull, your host. Thank you for tuning in to Aging Today, the podcast where together we explore together the options to aging on your terms. Join us again next week for another lively discussion on aging today. And remember, we're all in the process of aging. And as we age, we really are better together. So stay young at heart.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel like spring has sprung. And every time I see your face, I'm such a happy individual. The moment that you speak, I want to go play hide and seek. I want to go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. Well, you and I are just like a couple of tots running across the meadow, picking up lots of forget-me-nots. So you made me feel so young. You made me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be fun. And even when I'm old and gray.
You've been listening to Aging Today, where together we explore the options to aging on your terms. Join Mark and his guest next week for another lively discussion on proactively aging on your terms, connecting you to the professional advice of his special guests, with the goal of creating better days throughout the aging process. Your host has been Mark Turnbull. Join Mark and his guests every week on Aging Today, your podcast to exploring your options for aging on your terms.
And even when I'm old and gray, you make me feel the way I feel today. 'Cause you make me feel so. You make me feel so. You make me feel so young. So young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young.